Hey Scaredy Cats, it's me, Scaredy Matt. Before I get started, I want to give a big shout out to my pal Adam from Megaohonic. He sat down with me for hours last week and put up with a lot of technical difficulties for a video about the Halloween franchise that was going to come out for Halloween, and then I managed to corrupt and delete all the footage like a dingus. Fans of Scaredy Cats will absolutely love Adam's podcast, A Part of Our Scare-itage, where he talks about Canadian spook-em-ups. And since you're all big nerds, I know you're also going to love It's Just a Show, the internet's premier Mystery Science Theater 3000 podcast. I wasted a lot of his time, so if you could do me a favor and check out his stuff, that would go a long way towards me maintaining my interpersonal relationships. And now on with the show. You know, it's funny. Normally, I find child murder to be an unlikable quality in a character. Yep, that's the intro I've decided to go with. I'm just going to frame this discussion as highly uncomfortable from the beginning. Hey, listen. Freddy Krueger is the best slasher of them all. I don't think that's a particularly controversial opinion. If you're a horror fan, or more specifically a slasher fan, and you aren't down with Freddy, you sound like a big nerd. Go away, you big nerd. There are no bad movies with Freddy Krueger, as portrayed by Robert Englund, in them. And I mean, who's his competition? Jason Voorhees? That guy can't even decide if he's a zombie or not. Half the time, he just has a sack on his head. Hey Jason, dress for the job that you want, not the job you have. Michael Myers? Not exactly Mr. Personality. He only kills people and eats dogs. That's the only thing he does with his day. Pinhead? He's got like 2 good movies out of the 50 he's in. Leatherface? That's just a baby. It's literally a baby. But Freddy's dynamic. He won't just kill you. He'll turn you into a pizza, or a motorcycle, or he's a car sometimes, or he's gonna become your baby. I'm not doing my argument any favors. Beyond simply being so fun, Freddy is also the culmination of what makes slashers interesting as a concept. So many of them rely on the dark side of suburbia, the shocking darkness behind the perfectly manicured lawns and pristine white fences. You might think you're safe, but just behind the surface, there's a dark secret. I mean, look at the title of this franchise. It isn't just The Nightmare, it's A Nightmare on Elm Street. And like Freddy says in part 6,
every town has an Elm Street.
In part 1, all of the main characters know about Freddy's origins, but refuse to acknowledge him, even though it's causing their families great harm. They prefer to sweep it under the rug, just not talk about their problems, and hope to collectively force them to disappear through sheer denial. In part 3, characters literally take a drug to suppress Freddy. They're all confined to a mental hospital because it's easier to sequester them there than deal with their trauma in any meaningful way. The only person who listens to them, the only person who believes their story, is someone who's been there before. Nancy, the main character from the first movie. In Freddy v. Jason: Dawn of Justice, this is taken to its logical extreme. Anyone who so much as mentions Freddy is carted away to a mental hospital and drugged to make them forget about him. The police and all authority figures in Springwood are complicit in this grand conspiracy. This is how the parents of Elm Street deal with trauma. They try to forget, but no matter what they do, the trauma keeps emerging in dreams. See, Freddy doesn't just stalk the shadows like a typical slasher. I mean, sometimes he's lit darkly, particularly in the early films, because that's scarier, but everything about him demands your attention. He wears bright, contrasting colors, wears a hat that gives him a distinct silhouette, and everywhere he goes, he's got ghost children singing about him. Freddy wants you to pay attention to him. He wants you to dwell on him, because he's stronger the more you're afraid of him. And still, the parents of Elm Street prefer to live in fear rather than face the problem head on. And I remember really relating to that as a kid. It captures that feeling that all kids have, that the adults in their lives don't really understand their problems, that their anxieties and fears are being dismissed by older people whose priorities have more to do with how their children are perceived than how their children feel. So, of course, if your nightmares are coming to life and killing your friends that your parents don't even like, they're not going to listen to you. They're going to do everything in their power to get you to behave normally. In the first movie, there's not so subtle subtext about the way that Nancy's parents react to her deteriorating mental health by trying to establish firmer control over her sex life. They lock up her bedroom window with literal bars over it so she can't sneak out and her boyfriend can't sneak in. All the while, trapping her with a predator of their own making and refusing to listen when she brings it up. It's easier for them to try to control her than communicate with her or educate her. And their refusal to meet her on her own terms leaves her vulnerable to Freddy, who is explicitly framed as a sexual predator, like he keeps reaching for her groin. The remake would later make this text rather than subtext, just in case you were too thick to get it. Don't know why anyone thought that'd be a better movie. Let's just go into detail about his sex crimes. Enjoy your popcorn, America. Nancy's friends are dropping dead all around her, and her parents' main concern is that she might have premarital sex. And this is after she pulls a magic hat out of the dream dimension, by the way. The point after which any sane person would recognize that maybe Nancy was onto something when she talked about the monster stalking her in her dreams. On a literal level, this whole town wants to keep hush about Freddy because they're all complicit in his murder. But they go a lot further than just pretending like they don't know how he died. They refuse to acknowledge him at all. They deny his existence even when presented with proof. When kids won't play along and want to warn one another, they lock them away forever and leave them to rot and try to forget about him. Allegorically, Freddy comes to represent the way that hard truths are hidden from young people. Because parents don't want to speak honestly with their children, because they try to control them for the benefit of their own reputations, all sorts of problems begin to manifest in their lives. Violence, sexual assault, drug addiction, mental illness, even unplanned pregnancies. The victims in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are mostly children. Freddy doesn't just get revenge on the people that killed him directly, he comes for their kids, because he's a children's monster, fundamentally. When I was a kid, I would lay my head on my little pillow and dream of Ninja Turtles or whatever, and I could hear my pulse inside my ear, and I didn't know what it was, and it sounded like footsteps to me, so I would scare the shit out of myself, imagining it was Freddy Krueger coming to chop me up with his finger knives. And I'd never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I'd seen Freddy Krueger in Cracked Magazine. So that's how scary he is to children. That line between fantasy and reality, between dreams and the real world, it doesn't seem so concrete when you're younger. Sometimes the things you're afraid of just seem real. Sometimes it's like the things you're afraid of can hurt you just because you're afraid of them. Now, what would your parents tell you? There's nothing to be afraid of. The things you're imagining are not real, and they're right. They're not. But you can't really help but wonder, if they were real, they'd still think that, wouldn't they? They'd still dismiss my concern. And then you get a little older, and you start to learn about all of the shitty things in the world. You learn that no one is really safe all the time, that freak accidents can occur, that there are murderers out there. Maybe some of your friends are having sex or doing drugs. Maybe you've been offered drugs or sex drugs, which are drugs that you can have sex with, and you don't really know what to do about it, and no one seems to want to give you a straight answer. All the adults in your life want to tell you is just not to worry about it. Don't think about it. Don't question it. But somewhere in the back of your mind, you know that there's something they're not telling you. Something that they know, but they don't think you can handle. So imagine then, you had an impossible problem. A problem that was dangerous, difficult to believe, salacious, and you couldn't talk about with anyone. I think most of us can relate to that feeling. Most of us can remember how confusing and frustrating transitioning from a teen to a young adult was, and how the advice you received so often seemed to conflict with your own priorities and the things that were important to you at the time. And that's what truly elevates Freddy as a slasher villain. Who are slasher movies for, if not teens? And he represents teenage anxiety more potently than any other character I can imagine. He is trauma, he's secrecy, he's something that everybody has to face alone, because he strips you of your support network, and you either learn to face him head on, or you become a gooey face on his chest. See, Jason, or the Shape, or Chucky, or the Ginger Dead Man might kill you, but young people aren't all that afraid to die. Kids think they're immortal. That's what makes them so hard to keep alive. Old people, like me, are afraid to die. Young people are afraid to find out that the world isn't what their parents told them it would be. That it wasn't as full of promise as it was made out to be. That maybe there's dangers lurking around every corner that they aren't prepared to face, and nobody will tell them. Then in part 6, it turns out that he got his dream powers from evil sperms. Then in New Nightmare, he's a Jungian archetype. You see, Freddy is the witch from Hansel and Gretel, which means that he's real, and also he's got bone claws like Wolverine in the 90s. Sometimes he's a chef. Look out, here comes Super Freddy. And let's not even get into Freddy Spaghetti.
I am Freddy D. Spaghetti, king of carbohydrates. Yeah!
Whoa, now that's a spicy meatball.
Freddy Spaghetti represents the way we repress spaghetti. Please press the like and subscribe button and watch the other videos here on Scaredy Cats.